I need you, since we're talking about Wendigos and scary stuff. Um, I think it was in your Q&A video, maybe you talked about like that weird deer story,
Mm,
scary thing that happened, and then I think, man, this is I'm like pulling from the recess.
yeah, yeah.
But did you say there was something else that was like maybe another scary story or a more scary story? Would you maybe feel comfortable on elaborating on that at this time, or is that
Yeah,
like a
yeah.
future
No, no,
video
no.
idea
It's
or
fine.
something?
So the deer, I think I was specifically revolving around the not deer. Also, what you got to understand is I live and have grown up my entire life in like southern Appalachia. Like these are old woods, right?
Mhm.
And a lot of the time, I don't want to say this to sound too like pretentious or like oh spooky, but a lot of the time weird things happen and you're just supposed to not go after it, right? Like if you talk to any old hunter around these parts, they'll have some story of some like to anyone else that would be absolutely freaked out, like insanity, and they'll always end the story with, "And I just left. I just got out of there," because what you're supposed to do with a lot of this stuff is just walk away. Um, what happened with the deer? So I was driving down a road coming back to my house one night. It was around 1 in the morning, and I turned the corner and facing away from me on the road was a stag. It was a deer with like sort of modest antlers, and it was completely frozen, facing away from the vehicle. So I turned the corner pretty fast on it, and I like slammed the brakes. And by the time the car came to a stop, I was maybe 15, 20 feet from it, and it was just standing there in the headlights, and the steer was not moving. Normally, whenever you turn the corner on a deer, they shoot off the road really quick. This one was not doing that. So I sat there for a second and I'm like, dude, should I honk the horn? Should I do that or whatever? And then without moving any of the rest of its body, its head started to rotate and it turned its head to where it was sideways and I saw the one eye. And then it's really hard to describe, but like it turned its head and then it turned its body to match it. Like its head and its body were moving into it wasn't moving the way a deer's supposed to move.
Right.
So it turns itself completely sideways and then it sets like that for a second and then it turns its head directly at me. Now here's what's weird. Deer are herbivores, right? And the way that herbivores are is they have eyes on the either side of their head, so that way they can have a range of motion of predators. So, like for example, a horse or something like that, whenever it looks at you, it actually looks at you from the side because that's where it's got the best angle. If a horse is wanting to stare at you, it does not do it from the forehead forwards because it's got bad vision like that. So the deer turning its head to stare at me like that was not something a deer would ever do. So it stares and it stares at me like that, and we are just like locked for what felt like forever. It was probably closer to like 15 seconds, and it's just the middle of the road at night. My car stopped in the middle. It's like this kind of foggy area, and I'm just staring at the forehead of this thing that is acting like a deer when it's not supposed to be, or isn't acting like a deer when it's supposed to be. And then I got cold everywhere at once. It was like something was touching me. It was awful. I felt it just like this feeling run all over me. And then it turns its head back the way to match the rest of its body and then jumps over the road real quick, over the hillside. And I got out of there. And I went home that night and had these incredibly vivid nightmares of it was so that kind of relates to the other story I talked about that's more freaky. I used to be very into lucid dreaming until I messed up a few times in a row and basically got stuck. And really weird stuff happens. But actually, that night, I had nightmares of what essentially was like antlers and this creature following me.
Hmm.
That I didn't see again until I messed up with the lucid dreams. And now, every time that I have a nightmare, those things start to pop back up. which, according to Native American folklore in the area, means I've like caught a bad spirit, which is fun, and I'm glad that that's what happened. But yeah, so that's the not deer. There's other like most hunter, like there's one guy I know who watched a deer beat its head in, like bash its head in on a rock. Things like that you just don't approach. You just leave. I just like as soon as that deer got off the road, I didn't get out with the flashlight like, wait, come back, I want to touch you. I just drove. But yeah, so a bunch of weird stuff like that is fairly common. Nice. I remember being like very young, and like I remember seeing some things that I've like, you know, logically explained through in my head. Like one of the reasons the stairs in the woods is such an interesting concept to me is I remember coming across a door that was placed in front of a staircase whenever I got away from my parents in the woods, and then I wasn't able to find it later when I went looking for it. Now, of course, I would have been like 8 at the time, so you can be like, oh, you're 8, you were dumb, you didn't know how to get back there, which is how I've justified it to myself. Right. But it's still like things like that I just kind of think back to sometimes. It's part of the reason I'm so interested in it now. So yeah.
Right. The staircase in the woods, those are very interesting for sure.
It's so weird how many people, like especially around the area I live, have at least similar stories or sightings. Like I remember when I was a kid, my grandfather told me that there was this brown door he kept seeing, that it would be like just beyond the tree line, and he would be like, I got to get over that thing, and then he'd like turn past a tree and it would like not be there. But it's like as he was moving houses, he would go out hunting and he'd keep seeing that brown door. Just stuff like that, really weird. And it's like, unlike my grandfather, you're not supposed to run it down and try to open it. It's probably a bad idea. Yeah.
Hey, thanks for watching this clip of the Showboys podcast. If you like what you heard, please go check out the full episode on our YouTube channel or anywhere you find your podcast content. Please remember to hit that subscribe button, join the Showboys Discord, and if you want to support the podcast and what we do, sign up to become a patron today at patreon.com/showboyspodcast.